You know, as many midnight screenings as I've gone to, I've never had this problem come up before. Iron Man 3 poster, anyone? Iron Man 3. Now, Iron Man 3 stars Robert Downey Jr., Don Cheadle, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jon Favreau, Guy Pearce, Rebecca Hall, and Ben Kingsley. Now, this is the first major Marvel movie to come out after the Avengers, and everyone loved the Avengers, everyone went nuts for it, everyone loves Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. But how is Iron Man 3 as a movie? Well, let's get to the story first. Now, the story of Iron Man 3 follows post-Avengers, and it follows our favorite genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, Tony Stark, as he's sort of reeling from the events of the Avengers, and he's dealing with all these anxiety attacks, these post-traumatic stress events. I mean, the guy fell out of a wormhole, nearly on the verge of death, and was barely saved thanks to the Hulk, if you saw the Avengers, and he's just a total wreck in this movie. I mean, he is just constantly in his workshop, tinkering on Iron Man suits. He's just kind of going crazy. He's kind of in constant friction with his girlfriend, Pepper Potts. He's just an all-around nutcase in this movie. He's just kind of gone, ugh. He's very stressed out. Let me put it that way. He's just very, very stressed out. And it certainly doesn't help when two new villains come onto the scene in the roles of Ben Kingsley playing the Mandarin and Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian. And both of these basically, how do I put this lightly? Yeah, they basically take Tony Stark's work to high holy hell. And basically Tony Stark is now put into this rat's corner, and he's just bottlenecked. He's just put in this one little small area. He's just like, he has to use his brains and his intelligence and use that to find a way to bring him out of this desperate situation when he's pretty much hit rock bottom. I mean, he went from the top to the bottom in about the span of about 15 minutes in the movie. And it hits hard and fast pretty bad. Now, before I go completely fanboy out, let me go ahead and sum up my thoughts as to what I thought was the good and the bad when it came to Iron Man 3. Probably my favorite thing overall in the movie is the fact that there is not so much a lot of Iron Man in this movie. Now, I know a lot of people might be expecting that this is going to be an all-out action movie, and there's going to be tons of Iron Man just kicking ass, and it's just going to be a total action fest throughout. Now, granted, there is quite a bit amount of action, but that will come into the last maybe third of the movie, where it just is just one gigantic scene and one fight after fight after fight for at least a good, I would say, 45 minutes to maybe an hour at maximum, depending on how you look at when the climax starts. And the story itself isn't so much focused on Iron Man, but Tony Stark himself, and that he is dealing with all this anxiety problems, with these issues of dealing with such a larger-than-life event with the Avengers, and he's just like, it almost seems like he's scared, and it's just like you dealt with gods of thunder, and you dealt with the giant green rage monsters and aliens and wormholes and nearly dying through a wormhole, barely making it out alive. You might expect a guy like that to be like, holy crap, we are really, really small. I am like nothing compared to these people. And you really get a chance to see that, and not to mention, you get the chance to see, like, he's trying to hold on to anything at all. And the one major thing that keeps him mentally sane and together, which is Pepper Potts. And he even mentions in the movie, I have to protect the one thing I can't... Crap, someone Skyped me. He has to protect the one thing I care about, and that is you, Pepper. And he is trying to keep it so together, and I love the fact that it dives so much into Tony's psyche, and that he is so not put together in the course of this movie, and yet when this external threat of Guy Pearce and the Mandarin comes in, or Aldrich Killian and the Mandarin, sorry, comes in and just basically rips his world apart. It just, you see him not only mentally but physically beaten to hell, And it's really cool to see him kind of torn down to those roots and bring himself back up using only his intellect. And that's one of the reasons why I love this movie. Another thing I loved about this movie is the action. Holy crap, is the action awesome in this movie. I mean, there's tons of moments where Tony Stark's just messing around with Iron Man's suit. He's having a little bit of fun with it, but at the same time, he actually uses it effectively, and it actually is pretty creative how he uses it to his environmental advantage, or maybe to protect something he cares about, or maybe how he adapts this Iron Man suit into a certain environmental situation. And not only that, the last third of this movie just kicks so much ass. It kind of reminded me of the ending to Avengers a little bit, where you see all of this stuff happening, all this larger-than-life stuff, and yet in this movie, it's all just one little particular incident in the context of this bigger, grandiose plan that is going to lead up to Avengers 2 eventually. And just seeing that, I was like, oh my god, I cannot wait to see this movie. I cannot wait to see Avengers 2. And this movie gets me all the more excited to see Avengers 2. And just seeing the action just escalate from, I was like, oh wait, we gotta go from this scene. Oh wait, we gotta take a little small break. Then goes back up to action again. And then takes a little bit break. And then, boom, all the way up to 11, just like in the climax. It was like, this is totally kick-ass. I mean, this is exactly what I wanted to see when it came to Iron Man in terms of a climax, and I wanted to see good character development, I wanted to see good action scenes. I mean, this is the definition of a summer movie that just rocks on every level. Another thing I liked about this movie is the fact that certain other characters had other moments of relevance, like Don Cheadle. I mean, I liked Terrence Howard as Rhodes in the first movie, but when Don Cheadle came in Iron Man 2, I was like, okay, I could see him play Rhodey a little bit. He seems to be a good guy. He seems to fit the role all right. But this one, I was like, yep, this is Iron Patriot. This is War Machine, and he really came into his own. And I really like the fact I was like, yeah, I actually like Rhodey a little bit more. He actually does a little bit more stuff, and he actually has a little bit more relevance. And seeing him, I was like, I want to see more Rhodey stuff. I would like to see that, but. Another case would be being Pepper Potts. I mean, Pepper Potts in this movie is a lot more relevant in that she is the one anchor in Tony's life to be like, yes, this is a moment where it's like, I can't afford to lose this one thing. I mean, if you've ever had something that you really wanted to protect, you will go to the ends of the earth to protect it if you care for it that much. And in Tony's case, it would be Pepper Potts. And it just shows us like how easily breakable that someone is when they only have one thing in the world that they are so much about they might be willing to die for it. I mean, Tony Stark, I mean, come on. Robert Downey Jr. owns Tony Stark. I mean, the guy could probably legally change his name to Tony Stark and no one would have a problem with it. I mean, the guy just owns this role. I mean, I can't see anyone else doing Tony Stark at this point. I mean, the guy just owns the role. He is Tony Stark. Everyone in this movie just came into their own, and they are these characters at this point, and I'm completely satisfied with it. Another small thing I really enjoyed in the movie was Ben Kingsley's performance as the Mandarin, and no, I am not going to imitate his voice because I cannot do impressions to save my life. I mean, I just like the fact that his voice was very eloquent, it was well spoken, and it was like the way he professes his kind of teachings or his philosophy of being not a terrorist, but a teacher and someone who's a lesson, I thought it was kind of interesting. I mean, granted, I wouldn't call him a strong villain. At least I don't think he qualifies as a strong villain. But at the same time, he is a fun villain to watch. And I need to mention this up, and this might count as a criticism for some people. I've heard some people complain about a certain moment in the movie that it's going to be a dividing point of either people are going to love it or they're going to hate it. I won't spoil what that is for the sake of people finding out for themselves and determining their own opinion, but I will say this, I can understand why people will get upset. However, in my mindset, given the context that they presented the Mandarin in, and I was like, okay, I see why you went there, why this movie went in this direction, and I figured, given the context of what they were doing with this movie, in terms of setting up for the Avengers 2, I'm not so mad when I take a look at the big picture. I mean, in the movie itself, I can see why people would get mad, but in terms of the long run, I was like, okay, I see why you did that, in order to set this up for the Avengers, and just like, because it seemed like for Avengers 2 they're setting up a much bigger villain, and because if you saw the Avengers, pretty much everyone has, with Thanos being the big bad guy at the end, for Avengers 2, possibly, with what they did with the Mandarin in this movie, I was like, okay, I can see why. But again, I can get why people say they do not like the movie because of what they do with the Mandarin, if they love it or they hate it. But personally, I'm okay with it, and I was fine with the context of what they were giving it and trying to see in the long run. Another thing I found a lot of fun with the movie was the score itself. I mean, there were certain moments that just helped the mood of the setting and the atmosphere just so much. I mean, there were certain moments like, and okay, this is not technically, this is a spoiler because it happens in the trailer, when Tony Stark's house is actually collapsing into the water, it just, the music helps emphasize the desperation and just the sheer, like, holy crap, this is terrible of what is about to happen. And there's also certain quiet scenes where it's just like, you feel like, I really don't want to spoil the rest of this movie, I really don't, where certain moments come to like, no, and it's just like, you almost want to go like, you want to reach out towards the screen and just be like, I don't want this to happen, because you've grown emotionally attached to these characters and this story and all this time you spent together, and it's just like, okay, it's okay, it's fine, it's fine. If this review sounds a little bit muddled, it's because I'm trying to describe and be as in-depth with this movie in terms of my opinions as much as I can without spoiling it, because I really do not want to spoil this movie for you, because I am begging you to see this movie because it is awesome. Another thing I have to mention is the humor. This is probably my overall favorite Iron Man movie because of the amount of humor they added into this movie. Because there's this, it feels like there's this trifecta of action, drama, and humor. And this movie constantly bounces from one to another, kind of like a pinball game, and you constantly see this constant shift in tone between humor, drama, and action, and it's just, it all works. It all creates in this one perfect concoction of that just, it just works. It really does work. You see a moment where Tony's kind of like on his knees, and he's just, I don't know what to do, like New York is just boggling my mind, it's driving me nuts, and I'm just having a panic attack, to where it's just like, and then all of a sudden, he says this one line, I was just like, that's actually really funny, and yet he can still be a bit of a jerk, but he's a fun jerk to be around, and he's a funny one, and I mean, that's the key, like, if you can balance those three elements with an Iron Man movie, action, drama, and humor, you basically makings of a good movie there. And that's a really hard combination to put all together and make it work. And I feel like Iron Man 3 did its job pretty well. I won't spoil what those jokes are or what those lines are, but it's just like, trust me, it's pretty funny. It's really, really fun. So my bottom line comes down to this. Great action, awesome character development for Tony Stark, seeing him build himself up from the ground again. Side characters becoming relevant more for Don Cheadle and Gwyneth Paltrow specifically. Villains that I felt fit the role very well, and a soundtrack that was perfectly fitting for the tone of the movie, and just an overall, the movie just did its job very well. Shane Black did a great job putting all of this together, and I can't think of a better way to kick off the summer movie season. So overall, I would have to say Iron Man 3 is most definitely worth every penny. So there, everybody, there's my review of Iron Man 3. I hope you enjoyed this review, and until next time, I'm Perry the One-Armed Legend. You name it, I can play it.